Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The program is coming to you Monday to Friday on CGTN. While British Prime Minister Theresa May announced her resignation, candidates are campaigning hard in the Conservative Party leader election. But will May's departure affect China-UK ties? This week, Chinese Vice Premier Hu Chunhua co-hosts the 10th China-UK Economic and Financial Dialogue with British Chancellor of the Exchequer Philip Hammond. The two sides are eyeing cooperation on trade, investment, and other issues such as 5G services. For more on China-UK ties, joining us in Durham, Tom Brooks, Dean and Professor of Law and Government at Durham University. In Beijing, Cui Hongjian, Director of the Department of European Studies at the China Institute of International Studies. Gentlemen, welcome to our program. Of course, every occasion when the two sides, leaders get together, should be one celebrated because there are a lot of interactions, Professor Brooks, going on right now between the two sides. 65th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations. That certainly is something to celebrate about. But what is the new momentum? What do you see as the new one, Mr. Brooks?
Well, there's an awful lot to celebrate between the ties between the two countries, and it's a very strong and healthy relationship. In terms of the new momentum, I think there's an awful lot on China's side that is brought, but I think that in Britain there is this real paralysis in Parliament over Brexit and Britain's relationship with the European Union that is not going. It wasn't going away under Theresa May. Theresa May was not successful in seeing Brexit through, but now the new leader, whoever it will be. All of them have vowed to see a Brexit through, and that's really, I think, unfortunately, seemingly their only focus. They haven't really said anything about Britain's role in the world, international policy, international development, or even domestic affairs. It's been entirely concentrated on Brexit. Though there should be some very big things in future to come, but Brexit needs to happen first in their eyes.
Professor Brooks was very diplomatic in suggesting no matter who is visiting the UK or what you want to talk about, what we are thinking about right now among the politicians are the Brexit or, on our way to Brexit. So, Mr. Cui, does it make sense?
That's right.
Unfortunately.
Sure, I agree with Brooks' views. I think now, besides this, long tradition of the cooperation between two countries, I think one of the very valuable things for these two countries is still, I think it's different from some other European countries. And China and the UK, we do have a very big complementary, cooperation areas or space.
Please.
For example, how about the financial service sector? So I think this, especially now, this time, it will give a very, very big, momentum for both two countries. And then, of course, the scenario of Brexit will be another momentum, no matter it's positive or negative. But indeed, I think especially British side try to take any chance of the cooperation with China, and in the scenario of the Brexit.
You see, that is the issue of priority, isn't it, Professor Brooks? If you look at the UK, the biggest priority, the immediate task is about the Brexit or not, how to do it or not do it. And then, Mr. Cui, for China, the immediate priority is how to survive and thrive out of the current geopolitical situation, including cooperating with the UK. But certainly one is about looking out, the other is about looking inward. Very different priority. How would you be able to line up these different priorities and make the two sides have any consensus? Professor Brooks, I do need to invite your wisdom here.
Well, thank you. I think that's right. I think China is very much looking outward and looking to engage and in a very positive and exciting way. And I think that there's been some reception to this. The current government was reported to be open to considering Huawei coming in to help build some parts of the 5G network that the government has been trying to get moving on for some time. So and that's one of many other examples. But the problem is very much domestic politically for the British government in terms of Brexit, the mandate that they think they had to deliver on that, and the problems that that's causing. That said, that's the concern of the government. I mean, when it comes to businesses, I think that the need to look for new markets, new partners, or to engage with existing partners in a stronger way, I think is something that's never been kind of more important. And I give one very quick example. I'm Dean of Durham Law School, and one of the things that we did earlier this year is we launched the largest Center for Chinese Law in Europe here in Durham, because we recognize that in terms of the global legal sector, China is a very important part to play. It's very important for legal education and shared knowledge between our countries of the UK and China, and we saw a real need to move this forward and take a lead on it. I think there'll be others following suit, but maybe not looking to the government for inspiration.
So Brooks, Durham University do that. It's certainly very inspiring. However, one has to point out that there were occasions in which the previous administrations, I wouldn't exactly mention which, had agreed with China on the whole package of cooperation possibilities, and both sides have been trying to deliver. However, with the change of administration, everything changed, or at least everything changed to a certain extent. So there was quite a struggling from the Chinese side to try to find who to work with, about what, and to what degree. Now, we are facing a very similar, probably even more situation right now. You do not even have a prime minister now, and every of these candidates, strong ones, have their own political agenda, I have to say. So, Mr. Brooks, despite of the law center you have established over there, how much do you think, whether it's about 5G or other financial cooperations, will eventually be delivered? Of course, we all want to deliver, but how much? What's your pragmatic analysis? Before I go to Mr. Cui, Professor Brooks first.
Yes. Well, I think when it comes to the legal sector, which I know an awful lot about, and in the financial sector in the city, I think it's already engaging with China and not waiting for a prime minister to tell it to do one thing or another. I think that what I've started here in my school is something that other law schools will be doing, and it's something that's been featured a lot in the news in the UK. In terms of, you're absolutely right on so many points that you raise with me in this interview and others. But I agree with you that there's been many promises on the British side, an issue about following through. It has not helped that there will be a new Prime Minister. We've got no idea really who it will be. We have a front runner in Boris Johnson, former Foreign Secretary, who did not achieve much at all as Foreign Secretary and was not in the role very long, is not very experienced on worldly affairs. You have Jeremy Hunt, the current Foreign Secretary. He came second. He's got almost as much experience in the role as Boris Johnson did, a bit more capable than Boris. I think would probably be a better partner for China than Boris Johnson might. But it's all very speculative. None have given a manifesto for what that vision will be about engaging beyond and how they will make good on the promises that have been made by the current government and past governments to China and to other very close special friends of Britain. And that is a problem. I agree with you.
Mr. Cui, I mean, no offense here. If China has a difficulty approaching the current leadership inside the UK, nobody knows who exactly it is. So other countries would have the same problem. Okay, everybody has an equal challenge. However, for China, this is a critical time. It's a time to illustrate exactly where China should go, could go for partnerships with important countries around the world. UK certainly is a big part of it. So, Mr. Cui, to what extent do you think China is patient enough to be neutral during the process in which the UK is trying to select its future prime minister, which is very crucial. Secondly, to what degree do you think China is matured enough and sophisticated enough to understand and grasp the ways to communicate, to lay a foundation? Mr. Cui.
I think firstly...
I was asking you this question as if you were on that specific delegation. Of course you're not, but I'm sure you have your thoughts here. Mr. Cui.
Certainly. I think now I agree with you that it's a very crucial time for China to look for any opportunity to get a closer cooperation with the UK, because even now we have the so-called golden era, definition for these bilateral relations. But of course, I think China also has to suffer some uncertainties from this change of administration and also uncertainty of Brexit. But of course, I think maybe a good news for China and the UK is no matter which leader will decide this Brexit scenario or process, or which kind of Brexit it would be, soft one or hard one. Undoubtedly, China would be very, very important partner after the Brexit. Because once there will be a so-called hard Brexit, certainly there will be a very big requirement from UK side on China to get some more trade, investment, and even some other cooperation.
Sure.
Just like this time, this dialogue between China and the UK on the finance and also finance and economy, we can find out a lot of achievement on the agenda, including this connect, between the stock market in Shanghai and London, and also some other. Because I think China is a so big market in the eyes of the British business people and also financial sector. So a lot of attraction.
Both sides are looking at each other as extremely important alternative and partners, particularly with the dramatic change both sides are experiencing in different ways. However, there's one thing, Professor Brooks, that is the UK as part of the so-called the West, so-called, and also as a so-called a member of the Five Eyes, which is a security alliance between the United States and several other of its allies in the West to work on security on the internet and in the cyberspace. So, Mr. Brooks, how much will the U.S. apparent concerns and politics toward China filter into British understanding of the situation? Will the UK be able to come with its own real analysis of the situation and do things according to its own analysis, not just by hearsay? Mr. Brooks.
Well, I do hope that the British government does, follows its own analysis and is not, taking orders from Donald Trump's White House or the United States more generally. I think the current issues around the United States and other countries in the world are really a product of one particular individual in the White House and not necessarily representative at all of the American public. I know this is someone who originally is from the United States or even many of its politicians. And I think that a lot of the problems that we see in terms of relations between the U.S. and elsewhere may well go away as soon as there is someone else that is president. In the meantime, I'm very hopeful that the British government will follow its own analysis at a time when Britain needs to look elsewhere for somewhere beyond Europe to build new markets with and develop itself. It has done something that has upset the Americans and elsewhere, and I think that was a bold move and a brave move. And so far, after Donald Trump's visit to see Theresa May, the Prime Minister, and meeting Her Majesty the Queen, Theresa May has not changed her mind on this. And in fact, the leadership candidates can be criticized for not saying much beyond Brexit, and they are not saying much about beyond Brexit. But none of them have also said, to my knowledge, anything about changing that deal. And I think Britain really does need to look east, needs to look to China, have closer ties to China in the future if Brexit is to be a success.
Yeah. Mr. Cui, this is a very crucial question. I'm sure both of you, Professor Brooks and Mr. Cui, heard the interesting quote coming from the Russian President Vladimir Putin during the Economic Forum in St. Petersburg. He was talking about, you know, when the two tigers are fighting, the monkey in the mountain better watch and wait for the result. Of course, he said after that, that as Russia, it sees China as a partner and therefore not just there to watch, but rather want to align some of the interests and be able to make the best out of it. So, Mr. Cui, I'm not using this analogy for the UK because Russia and the UK are totally different things. But how would countries be able to come up with its own way of analysis when looking at the real change going on? Well, at the same time, Mr. Cui, China does not want force anybody to be in a corner and say choose Team A or Team B. So what kind of, you know, chemistry can be really created at this moment between the UK and China, Mr. Cui, realistically speaking?
I think for most of European countries, including UK, they do have a different feeling with Mr. Putin on so-called potential, gaming between China and the US. I think maybe the possible feeling from UK on this issue is once there are two elephants dancing on the grassland, how about the feeling of the grassland itself? So I think it's right the case of the 5G or Huawei issue in UK. We can find that now Britain not yet to give up any commitment to any pressure from Washington, and now London still try to insist it's a kind of maybe independent or smart way to deal with this issue. But of course, I hope that because it's a very important tradition for British foreign policy to keep a balance between any gaming between the big powers or some other in the history. So I believe that this time Britain would also try to look for maybe a third way to deal with this difficult issue.
Well, we'll try to see what the third way is, if there is any. Thank you so much for now. Cui Hongjian, Tom Brooks, learned a lot. Thank you so much for both of you.